Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz tonight. Thank you.
Well, it's like a dream come true to be here. When I heard that LaborFest was forming in Hawaii last year, those of us who work on it in San Francisco were so excited. 3 years ago, we started one in Oklahoma City. I'm from Oklahoma, so I helped start it. And it's like this a day and a night before. It's wonderful. And it has actually you. And in Oklahoma, there's far more actual trade union worker involvement. I have to say, in San Francisco. So congratulations for doing this, and I hope it thrives and grows and gets a lot of support. So it's really an honor for me to be here with you. It's kind of accidental because I was invited to do a symposium on my book, The Great Sioux Nation, at University of Hawaii this week, and just happened to coincide. So I sort of piggybacked on being here. I'm really grateful. I wanted first to, just before I get to the Great Sioux Nation and why I think it's relevant to workers and labor even here in Hawaii. I want to tell a little bit about my own background. I was raised in Oklahoma by parents who were sharecroppers, sometimes migrant workers, cotton pickers, but when I was really little, but sharecroppers. So we were very, very poor. My mother's part Cherokee, also very poor and oppressed, and my father was a settler, Scotch-Irish settler of the people who kept losing land if they got it and moving, trekking across the country and ending up in Oklahoma. I say all the losers ended up in Oklahoma. And I say that with pride, but it kind of insults other people when I say that. Because I think losing under capitalism is no great shame, as almost everyone does. But my grandfather, and I heard these stories throughout my childhood, my father's father, Emmett Dunbar, named my father, who was born in 1907, Moyer, Haywood, Scarberry, Pettibone, Dunbar. Do those names ring a bell? Those were the founders of the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. And they were founded in 1905. My father was born in 1907, the year of statehood in Oklahoma, but also the year that those leaders were on trial in Boise, Idaho, for murder. And Charles, his name just slipped my mind. The lawyer. What? Yes. Anyway, my grandfather had joined the Socialist Party and in Missouri before they moved to Oklahoma. He was already active. He had 7 children already. He's a veterinarian. And when he moved to Oklahoma, he joined the IWW. It was active in Oklahoma with the, IWW was mainly active with migrant workers, miners, hard work miners, but also wheat threshers and the oil workers in Oklahoma, the coal miners. So Oklahoma was a very, unlike Steinbeck's bucolic description, it was a very industrialized place. It was a very radical place. The trade union movement there, the Socialist Party, IWW sort of turned everything to the left so that the first state flag was a red flag with a 46 on it. I'm not kidding. In 1922, after the labor movement was crushed in Oklahoma, they banned the flag. And it is illegal in Oklahoma to this day to fly a red flag. And we keep flying them, hoping to get arrested. But so far, no arrests. The state seal was a hammer and sickle. You don't know these stories about Alcoa, do you?
What happened to it?
And right. It's embedded in mosaic in the state capitol. And the right-wing Republicans who run the state now only recently figured out that Latin word meant labor conquers all. So they wanted to have it to dig it out, and they haven't yet. But so one thing we're trying to do there, and I think it's really that's what LaborFest is doing there, and I highly recommend it, is finding that radical history. It exists everywhere, and making that a part. The story, getting plaques put up. We do labor tours in San Francisco. We also did that in Oklahoma City and central Oklahoma. So I just wanted to start off by reading what hung on the wall of our sharecropper cabin as I was growing up in Oklahoma. And you will probably recognize these words. The working class and the employing class have nothing in common. There can be no peace so long as there is hunger and want are found among millions of working people, and the few who make up the employing class have all the good things of life. Between these two classes, a struggle must go on until all the toilers come together on the political as well as the industrial field and take and hold that which they produce by their labor. So, of course, that's a preamble to the IWW Constitution. So I feel very privileged that I got to grow up reading that, not quite understanding it, but identifying as a working class person, because that's very unusual in the United States. People call themselves middle class, and my dad never allowed that. We were working class. So how did I get involved with the Great Sioux Nation? Why do I think it's relevant? This book was my first published book in 1977. I got a PhD in history at UCLA, and I wrote The Roots of Resistance, A History of Land Tenure in New Mexico, that was then published in book form in 1980 and has been reissued in 2007. They have it at Revolution bookstores if any of you are interested. Of course, there's always Amazon too, just cheaper. Non-labor though. So support independent bookstores, whatever their politics is my attitude. But I got involved right after I finished my dissertation. I was studying colonial systems, Latin American history, empire, Spanish Empire, comparing Spanish Empire, British Empire, and in doing that, coming closer and closer to what has become my life's scholarly work and much of my activist work on indigenous peoples. And this book comes out of being kind of recruited, kind of kicking and screaming, not wanting to do it, getting involved in the aftermath of the Wounded Knee siege of 1973. When it was over after 2.5 months, over 300 people were arrested who had been inside. And that whole siege was about many things, but it was central issue was the Sioux Treaty of 1868, the Peace and Freedom Treaty that established borders, which the Sioux had never had before. But the borders were all of the states of South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, parts of Colorado, and Wyoming, and into Minnesota. It was a large territory. And that treaty was supposed to guarantee that land forever. Well, now, as you probably know, there's 7 separated small reservations, and all the land was taken illegally after the 1868 treaty. So the Sioux Treaty hearing that was held was a motion to dismiss the charges against all the people who their trials were remaining, due to lack of jurisdiction of the federal government based on the Sioux Treaty, which said that the Sioux could punish as they wished whatever crimes or misdemeanors took place in their nation. And that was simply not adhered to, and then Public Law 280 was passed in the 1890s that took all criminal felony jurisdiction away from Native peoples and stripped them of any kind of police sovereignty. It has all kinds of implications. For instance, the Violence Against Women Act had no effect on the reservations because it's just free territory to go rape and rampage because the Indian police had no jurisdiction over anyone who came in, and so they just get away. So it was an invitation for anyone who wanted to rape, and of course in a racist way, violence against Indian women. And it was most horrible on the Sioux reservations. So last fall, when they were going to renew the Violence Against Women Act, the Native lobby put into it, in cooperation with trade unions, by the way, and also the National Organization for Women, all supported this, that the sovereignty be reinstalled, the jurisdiction over people who were found, abusing women on the reservation, and Congress held it up. And a lot of people couldn't figure out, well, why are they holding up the Violence Against Women Act? It's passed over and over, been renewed for 20 years. And that was why, but they did pass it, so that was a real advance. And it was a real example of what an alliance, a coalition can do, putting pressure on Congress. And it doesn't happen enough. So I sort of was going to make the theme of what I had to say tonight is what side are you on? The old labor song. We have to think of when in 1992, the 500-year anniversary of Columbus, U.S. and all the Latin American countries and Spain and the Vatican were making this a celebration of the bringing of civilization to Christianity to the Americas. And we had by then quite a strong international lobby. We'd already been working 20 years in the United Nations, getting some, international law formed. So we also got Rigoberta Menchú the Nobel Peace Prize, which gave a high visibility to indigenous peoples in 1992. But the Latin American countries, US and Canada, as a bloc, were supporting these celebrations of Columbus. And only Cuba withdrew, and they had the most to lose because Spain was the main force behind these celebrations. And with the American boycott, practically blockade of Cuba, economic blockade, Spanish investments are crucial to survival in Cuba. It's a main investor, and Spain pulled out all their investments and really punished Cuba for what Fidel Castro said. You have to choose which side you're on. And I'm now having to choose, am I on the side of the colonizer or the colonized? He says, I'm going to be on the side of the colonized, and took that stand. So I think it's a real example of sacrifice for a principled stand. And I would like to see, I think it would actually energize the labor movement, the workers' movement, to be conscious in North America and Hawaii, other U.S. colonized areas and holdings, that there's a support both ways, asking for support from the Native Hawaiians and Native people for labor issues, involvement. Often they are, involved without anything coming in return, reciprocal, supporting the land issues and sovereignty issues. So that's what this book is really about. My own background and history and who I am sort of merges these two things. And I always like to bring them together as I can, as much as I can. I think we're totally dependent upon mobilizing masses of workers in the world, but especially in the United States, that nothing will change. But without the consciousness of colonialism, that it's a settler state and a mindset in which the founding and the exceptionalism leads us to constant wars. Putin was right the other day, the exceptionalism thing was good to get it out in the open because it's rarely ever even questioned, by ordinary U.S. citizens. So that's what I'll leave you with, and hopefully Rich, he and I have talked about this a lot, and we'll have some responses to what I've had to say, and all of you too. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Drop us the line. Yeah, I'm going to. My friend.
Feel good about stacking.